An unearthly hello to my fellow horror enthusiasts. Welcome to the Writers of Horror podcast. The Writers of Horror is a community for horror creatives, a place to connect with other horror enthusiasts and to elevate your horror writing. Find out all about us at writersofhorror.org. I'm Daniel Willcocks. I'll be your host for today, and today I am absolutely thrilled to have the wonderful Josh Malerman in my clutches. Hello, Josh.
Hello, everybody. A full arc of a wave to everyone. Hello.
Everyone listening, just a wave of a hand. And just for people that don't know who Josh Malerman is an award-winning novelist, short story writer, film producer, and one of the two singer-songwriters for the rock band The High Strung. He is probably best known for his smash sensation Bird Box, which was translated to Netflix films in 2018, featuring Sandra Bullock. And in 2020, Josh founded the production company Spin a Black Yarn with manager Ryan Lewis. Their first film, We Need to Do Something, was shot in secret during the COVID-19 pandemic. Josh, welcome to the show.
Yeah, excited to be here. Excited to talk horror and process or pets, whatever you have in mind.
Wherever the hell it goes, I might even go into, how much protein you have in your cereal in the mornings. But I want to kind of preface this because for people who might be interested, on my other podcast, Activated Authors, which was formerly Great Writers Share, I do a lot of podcast hopping. There is a full interview with myself and Josh back from 2020 around mid-pandemic, in which we dive into a lot of like creativity stuff there. So I will link to that for people who might want to listen to some of that stuff. And we're going to try and get a bit more into horror. But first, my big question, and this is based off of our last interview, based off of something that you said within that, is Josh Malerman, are you still in writing shape?
Oh yeah. So I did something pretty crazy recently. Let me give you the shortest version of this. I don't really feel like I'm able to fully express myself in either Twitter or Facebook, Instagram, these social media platforms. I mean, there are people who that they're great at it, and that's how they talk to people on a daily basis and this kind of thing. But I've never felt that through those platforms, I was able to express how I feel about writing. So about 3 books ago, I was like, hey man, you should make a documentary of the writing of this novel. While you write this, Josh, you should film it, right? And I was like, okay, that sounds like way too much work. No, I'm not doing that. So I wrote that book. Then 2 books ago, I was like, dude, you should make a documentary of this. And I was like, no, it's too much work. And for whatever reason, this last time around, I was like, let's do it. So some amazing producers got on board, and they helped me get like the better gear, like the right audio and a slightly better camera. And best of all, anything I filmed would be immediately uploaded to a cloud that I'm in Michigan, they're all the way in California, that they could like essentially view the dailies. And so they would weigh in on what I was doing and blah, blah, blah. And it really sort of became this like summer camp vibe where we were all so excited about this. And essentially it's just me filming the process. Don't imagine me writing the whole time. It's talking, you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so not only did I write the novel, but filmed 50 hours worth of footage of it, and it's being edited together like as we speak for like a featured documentary on the writing of a novel. So to answer your question, since then, and that was only a few months ago, since then the band released an album. I did a couple, what do you call it? I guess you could almost say like movie scores for no movies though, like sort of instrumental albums. And I was just talking to Allison last night about the next book, which I feel like I could start tonight even. So definitely in shape. Oh, I also rewrote the newest book. Definitely in shape. But wow, that experience of documenting was that was a different animal, man.
How does that look from your side of things, and what benefit do you feel like that has given you as a creative?
The documentary?
Yeah. The reason I ask is because you say that a couple of books ago, I did very, very similar, but mine was much more, I imagine, low budget. It was just me filming the screen as I did stuff with a little window of me explaining what I was doing as I was doing it. And I kind of got a few hours into that and then went, this is slowing me from writing. But I'm interested to know what the full experience would be.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm so glad that you did that because I have not talked to anyone that could relate like this.
It's heavy.
It's heavy. And, think about it this way, though. I had the producers who were like, hey, this is great, or, shot in the arm. So think about how long or how far that might have taken you had you had a bunch of other people weighing in saying, oh, this is amazing, keep going, right? So there was that. And then once it got to a point where it started to feel like okay, like you already shot this way. How are you going to do today? What creative thing are you going to do for the documentary today? What? But they kept coming. Ideas kept coming. Whether it was talk about this subject or film it from this angle, or there's a section where the camera's just on the ground and it's just my boots like pacing back and forth off camera while I'm discussing like a big decision in the book. I started thinking in terms of, you know, how to make the actual visuals a little more interesting than a dude just sitting at his desk, right?
Yeah.
And but the ideas kept coming. And then about the time where I reached the end, of the book, started to feel like I was running out of ideas for the filming side. And so there was a sense that I had of, I was like, okay, this is a wrap, you know, like because there was some talk like, oh, maybe we could film the rewrite, and then we can film eventually the release of the book. But I mean, who knows when that will be, you know? So to me, it was like, no, this is very contained. It is the actual just writing of the book and this story. I wasn't just done with the book, I was done with the documentary.
Yeah. Did you find any, because I found that the way that I tend to write, I'm very, I always say that if you're on, you know, the left side is sort of just panting and just writing what comes versus, you know, heavy plotting. I'm very much more leaned towards just write as it comes. And having to explain that process as I did it forced me out of the flow in some way. It was a bizarre experience. Like there was definitely benefit because it made me more, for want of a better word, structuralize how I write and kind of think about it a bit more methodically. But at the same time, as I was like relaying everything, I was like, it's pulling me away from the heart of why I get into the flow.
Well, okay, so my book, and I think we talked about this last time, my book Carpenter's Farm was excuse me, was essentially written as live as you could write a book, right? So I would write a chapter, post it on the website, write a chapter, post it on the website. And so I already had I guess you'd say the experience of something similar to what you're saying, where at some point I had to think ahead with Carpenter's Farm. I couldn't just pants it. I mean, I was pantsing it, but I had to be aware, like alert. And it wasn't just like, it wasn't quite the same as just anything goes because you're doing it in front of someone. So this had a bit of, I'm definitely a pantser. This had 90% of that, but there was also this element of, hey, Josh, you should know where you're going because otherwise we're gonna have to like backtrack and not just on the book, but on like the filming. Although there's also this though. Think about how interesting it is in the documentary if the writer starts saying what you just said, that you feel like filming it is screwing up what you're doing. So there were a couple times early on where I said to the producers a couple things, I don't remember what, but it was like, oh, this is making me feel like this or that. And they're like, great, talk about that. And I was like, oh, right.
Yeah.
And so they kind of opened some, and that's what I mean, having other people on board, right?
Yeah.
It kind of opened some doors for me in terms of like, hey man, anything goes. And then they're like, that's probably gonna be the best part of the documentary is when you're not sure if you should be making it.
Yeah, I think that's really testament to that kind of, I guess, the imposter syndrome that comes from being, especially like younger writers, and when you get more and more into creating the stories, you have that kind of want to be perfect. You want your process to be perfect, and like you say, like that's never going to be a thing. It's, you know, those hardships are the things that we all face, but it's the things that we try to hide the most.
Right, and like think, oh man, I watched like a 21-minute sort of thrown together version of this thing. It's going to be a feature, but I saw 21 minutes, and honestly, I was watching. I was like, "This guy's crazy." I was like, "This guy is nuts." Because there's a scene. Wow, there is a scene where I'm showing the audience all the horror vinyl in my office, and there's so many of them, and I'm like, "So I usually write to this one or this one." I'm showing all these, and then it strikes me on camera that I don't have the rights to any of this music. How am I going to play this while I'm writing?
Yeah.
And so there's on camera, I'm like looking at the camera, I'm like, oh no, I think that me and my band, I think we need to make my own soundtrack for this, our own soundtrack. So cut, me and my bandmates are recording, we're like in the studio recording the soundtrack for the documentary, and I'm going to be, for the rest of the documentary, I'm playing that music as I'm writing. And just little things like that where you're like, totally couldn't have planned for that. But that's a major moment because, not to talk about myself like this, but it shows like a writer who's like, oh my God, I have to even make my own music for this. Talk about do it yourself.
Just everything is done by you. And that's, I guess, we touched a little bit on this last time as well, but you're very much a creative. You're someone, music, film, book, whatever it is that sort of art persuades you to visit, that tends to be where you go. And since we last spoke, you have launched a film production company. Talk to me a little about that journey and how that kind of happened over the last 3 years, and what the kind of things you're doing with Spin a Black Yarn.
Well, it's been amazing because at first there was a sense of Bird Box came out and did well, and Ryan was a producer on that, but we didn't have any say. That book was optioned before the book even came out, and it's my first book, so we had literally no say. We were included, and it was a warm thing, like I told you, but we didn't have any say. So Ryan was like, hey, next time we should be producers. We should be producers on whatever you do from now on. So there sort of became the initial goal, and it's still the main goal. It was like, what can we get made of mine? Well, there's 37 novels, there's 40 short stories, there's soundtrack stuff, there's all this stuff. What can we get made? And at some point it was like, wait a minute, what about other people's books as well? And that's when Max Booth's We Need to Do Something, and we worked with like Haley Piper and Jonathan Jans and a lot of people, and that side of it is incredible. I will say that it's taken me a moment to what's the right phrase, grasp the business side, not the meetings or this or that or the contract. That's not what I mean. I mean almost like the how slow it all moves, because on the art side you are 100% in control. If you want to rush through your novel, ill-advised, go ahead, you literally can do anything. But that's not the case with other producers and the studio and cast and stuff. So there's I'm an impatient artist, and there's a certain patience on the business side that you have to have, or you're going to lose your mind. So it's taken me a while to swallow that. Aside from that, working with Ryan in this way and really watching him, man, he's so good at pairing up a story, an existing story, with a potential director. So we'll have a meeting with a director, knowing nothing about each other, really, right? Someone put us in touch, that kind of thing. We'll have a meeting, and the guy will be talking what he's into and blah, blah, blah. And I'll be thinking of all the books, And then Ryan will suddenly be like, you might like this story. And I'm thinking, that story, where did that come from? And then, now there was a great example of that, where now that story is with Universal, is with Jordan Peele's company, Monkey Paw. And I have no idea what connection Ryan saw between this short story and that director. And here it is. And he's brilliant at that. So there's that side of it on the business side that's super interesting to me. The pairing up, or the building of the team, right? This director, that idea, this look, this music, that side of it is super exciting. But again, man, do I wish it could all move faster.
Yeah. What's the sort of average, would you say, time span between that initial meeting towards a film being produced?
Oh, man. Well, an interesting thing about We Need to Do Something is Ryan had a brilliant idea there, where we had gone to the director originally in looking for funding, and he read the script, and he was like, I'd actually like to make this movie myself. And we were like, whoa, because we weren't planning on that at all, right? And we were really excited because we love this guy. But Ryan had the brilliant idea of, in the contract, saying, okay, you're the first person we went to, so we don't want to have a scenario where you say you want to do it and then it just sits there for years, right? So in the contract, Ryan was like, you said you want to do it right away, but now you have to within the year. And if you don't start it within the year, then we're going to shop it elsewhere. And I never considered that as a thing to include in a contract. I thought that's a brilliant idea. You're saying you want to do it. Okay, well, then there should be no problem that it's in the contract. And you're not trying to call someone out. You just don't want to say yes to the first person, and then this thing is stuck for 5 years when it could have been shopped somewhere else. So little things like that, where I'm watching Ryan work and pairing things up, and those kind of stipulations where you're like, man, this dude is smart, man.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill, and the frustration as well that having things options. The Other Stories podcast, which I do with some of the Hawk and Cleaver guys, we've had options on that a few times over the last 5 years, and you just sit there and wait, and those contracts tend to be quite long, and if nothing happens, nothing happens, and like you say, that's almost just wasted time. What would you say for people who are in horror, they're writing books and they're interested in getting their books into some form of film production? What expectations should they have, and is there anything you should proactively be doing as a writer to try and transfer over into that medium?
Well, there's a couple things that come to mind. One is not being afraid at all to reach out to other directors in the genre, or actors or writers, like just in a general sense. I think that the horror scene is like a lot, for as wide and expansive as it is, it's also like smaller than you might think, meaning that like, and we're also like vehemently in love with all this, and there's a million instances of like a quote unquote unknown actor or director or whatever first time making something brilliant, right? So I can't think of anyone in the scene that would like not even, or that would be like offended by an email, I can't even imagine that. So why not like reach out to everyone, whether it's producer, director, actor, whatever, and actually say like, hey, I have an idea, this kind of thing. That's one. Another one is, if you've got it in you to convert your book to a screenplay. So think about, and I don't necessarily know how much of that I have in me. I've done it a few times, and House of Bottom Lake was picked up by Netflix with me doing that. So there's some, that's awesome, but it's not home for me. It's not like the script is not home for me. But someone like Max, he wrote the book, then he writes a script, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we went to that director, or for funding, but whatever, he ended up directing. When we went to him, we didn't just say, here's an idea. We said, here's a script.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference. And so, you may feel like, let's say someone, I don't know, in his apartment, and it could be anywhere, Bristol, Detroit, could be anywhere. And you may think like, oh, nobody cares about my book, or no one's read it, or whatever. I do a screenplay. What the hell is it? What's the point of that? Well, it could be a big point. It could be something you're good at, number one. You could love doing it, number two. And number three, it could shortcut something, because if you have the actual script finished, you're no longer just saying, I have an idea. You're saying, here is the idea, for you to read. So those are a couple things that come to mind. Reach out and don't be afraid to, and also take initiative and just go take it the next step, whether or not someone tells you should or not.
I love that. There's definitely seems to be a sense of artists needing to be a bit more proactive with stuff than maybe they used to in the past, because it used to obviously be quite I say straightforward, obviously it wasn't, but give your stuff to an agent, to whoever, and it will go to a publisher, and so on and so forth. Whereas now, like you say, you can create all of that stuff, you can speak to the people, you can email out, you can reach out. I mean, you said yourself, when we last spoke, was it 17 novels that you had written before you even looked at reaching out to agents and things to get that done?
So there were 14 when Bird Box came out.
Yeah.
I think there were like something like 10 when that friend of mine sent Goblin to Ryan Lewis and blah blah. So I'm not the one that even thought of reaching out. It was my friend from high school that was like, let me send one of these out. But I just want it to be understood for a listener who I've never met or hasn't heard me. Writing was never like a hobby for me. That's a word that, for like someone like me, that the word hobby just sounds like so wrong. It was never like, oh, this is fun. No,
it was patronizing, isn't it? When someone's like, you got a nice hobby.
It is a bit, yeah. It'd be only because it's like, it makes it sound so like light, and I'm just gonna like, maybe I'll write a book tonight, And you're like, no, hold on. So it wasn't a hobby. I was playing in the band. We're playing out in different cities. I'm writing novels. I'm like talking about them constantly with other like writers and musicians and so, like very keyed in on all this, but simply had no concept of what to do with any of it. But also had this sense that, hey man, one day these are going to be on the shelf, whatever that means. I don't know how that's going to work. And when I was doing this though, like starting this, because like the first one was written in you can argue 2005, but it was like the very, very end of 2004. And the idea of self-publishing was very different back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so had I started right now, I have no question that I would have self-published like all of them, like as they, yeah.
How have your thoughts changed about that now? Because obviously, you've got that path already, you've got the platform, you've got the success with, agents and all the things that are going on. Is there any part of you that is intrigued by self-publishing still, or is it very much just,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely in terms of like there's 25 novel, backlog in this office, right? There's 2 crates full. And again, it wasn't that I like felt like I hadn't written well enough to shop it. So I'm confident in all of these. I wouldn't call any of them a quote unquote trunk novel. There's a few ideas I've started that I stopped in my life, that kind of thing. But there's not a book that I finished that I was like, oh, well, that was a lemon. Let's put that away. No, love them all. There isn't room to put them all out when you had 14 written before being published and you write 2 a year continuously. So does the idea of, self-publishing, there's some, yes, there's something romantic. It sounds like an outlet. It sounds like another or a different way of getting more things out there. At the same time, I don't want it to rub up against what I'm doing with Del Rey. So there's a bit of a juggling act there, but there are ways like Jewel in the Cape, Goblin, On This the Day of the Pig. Those came out, as limited editions first.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then Del Rey picked up Goblin and On This the Day of the Pig and House of Bottom Lake. And so, that not only did that not rub up against Del Rey, it actually they ended up bringing them wider. So there's a juggling act there, but there also are avenues to putting out more than just 1 book a year.
Yeah. Well, since I'm going to be a little bit selfish in my questions just for this one, because I've kind of gone self-published from the start, and I'm looking now more at getting into the agent path and looking at a few more traditional avenues. And I've actually been booked to pitch to some agents in a few months' time. What would you say is your advice when pitching a book to an agent?
I can only speak from like what I've seen with Kristen. But remember, I didn't pitch to her. I was already with Ryan Lewis, the manager, who did, him and the lawyer Wayne Alexander. So they brought Bird Box to her. But I have heard her talk enough or seen posts enough to understand that it seems like nobody's what's the right word? Like I might have thought before this to like, hi, I'm Josh, and my aim in writing is to do this, and my it seems like it's just like get to it, like distill it as solidly as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you're talking about like because you and I as writers, we're not thinking of our books in these landmark moments or we're thinking of like the artistry and like the weaving of like amazing thing to us. But in terms of pitching it, really try to distill it down to these are the bones. This is what matters. This is what's exciting. And it's not really my style, probably not yours, to look at your own work that way. Because to me, the beauty of Bird Box isn't necessarily like the premise, and that would be the pitch, right? To me, the beauty of that book is that it just seems to hold like one note the entire novel, just one boom, boom,
yeah,
boom, boom, the whole novel. Well, can you imagine pitching that? So I wrote a book, and it kind of just holds one note through all 300 pages.
We love it.
This is not interesting, But if I came up to her and I was like, okay, so the premise is that if you look at the monsters, you go crazy. It's a mother and a pregnant woman. So that's almost like counterintuitive to me and maybe you and most writers to look at your own book that way. But if you're going in front of an agent, they likely want like, these are the bones. This is what it's about. This is how it fits into the modern world. Here we go.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Let's dive into a bit more of the actual spooky horror side of stuff. I'd love to know a little bit more about what your entrance into horror was, and why you tend to lean towards the darker side of fiction. Because I know that's not all that you're about, but it tends to be the way that things skew. So where did kind of horror begin for you?
The first book was a Dean Koontz book, The Face of Fear. And I think that's the one that takes place entirely in an office building. And so someone like gets off work or whatever, there's a killer on the loose, whatever it is, and he's in the building or whatever. But it was my first experience with reading a novel where like all just took place in one setting. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is unbelievable. This is all, they're still in the whole, and not only not only did it take place all in one setting or one building, but it was like the most thrilling thing ever. And I think that prior to that, my concept of the novel was really expansive. I was reading a lot of if you think about like the classics and stuff, it'll span like even continents or families or homes or generations. This was an office building, a cat and mouse in an office building, and I was like, oh man, this and the propulsion. But the real selling point for me, or the real moment I was sold, was my uncle showed me or gave me a VHS copy of Twilight Zone, the movie. And if we talked about this before, sorry.
I don't think that we have.
Okay. And it was, what a way to be introduced to the genre. It was my first scary movie I ever saw. And what a way to be introduced, because it was 4 or 5 of very different stories that were all considered horror. So you had the first segment, which was like a social commentary. You had the second segment, which was like a heartwarming, Spielberg directed. You had the third segment, the Joe Dante, where the kid can do anything with his mind. And so that was like horror as elastic as it gets. And the fourth segment was the creature feature, the monster on the airplane. And so it was almost like a full education of the genre. There's even like gothic elements in that movie. It was a full education of the genre and the elasticity of the genre in the very first movie I saw. So if the first movie I had seen was Friday the 13th, right? I might have thought at 10, 11, 12 that horror was like just, stab them, which, I love those movies, but you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I might have thought that was it. And that it's something like Twilight Zone stretched that. But no, I had the inverse, which is said immediately the genre is stretched. And something like Friday the 13th is just one avenue one could take. Second movie I saw was Creepshow. So again, 4 or 5, maybe. Yeah, I think there's 5 in that one. Yeah, there are. And 5 segments. Those are a little more similar in terms of how they're shot and mood. And they're all definitely like, but still very different, like settings, this, character, like dynamics. One is Stephen King plays a character all alone in one. That follows the family Father's Day one, this kind of thing. And so right away, my introduction to the genre was like super wide. And I think that translates immediately to Bird Box, followed by Black Mad Wheel, followed by Unburied Carol, followed by Inspection. Is that, and someone will say, oh, your books are like so different. And I think, yeah, maybe they are. And I wonder how much of that has to do with that immediate introduction to the genre.
It makes a lot of sense. It's a good blueprint to begin with, yeah. And what keeps you excited about horror? Because you got all these classic films, you got all the classic books and things, and I came into horror probably 15, so about 17 years ago. I'm still playing a lot of catch up with some of the classics, but I'm very much enjoying just this surge of fresh horror and some of the amazing names and talent that's there now. What is it that keeps you excited in coming back to creating art within this genre?
I mean, I've said this before, but to me, there's just something almost borderline innocence, like this child. It's almost like this, what's the right word? Like I've sustained like an arrested development, a cherished arrested development, because I am still able to believe the constructs of the horror story, believe the monster, believe the horror for the duration of the film or the book. So, meaning I get scared. And so there's still like, you would think only a child would be scared of this demon story, that demons aren't real, And the great ones, not only do I believe in it for the duration of the story, but also some amount of days following. I saw Paranormal Activity in the theater, and all my friends were like, that was junk. And I was like chilled to the bone. And all my friends were like making fun of it. I was like, and I went home and I slept with the lights on for like 3 days. And, and I think about that sort of cherished, it's almost like holding on to childhood, but not in a resisting adult way. It's just aware that wonder, that dark magic of horror. Like, I can't imagine ever, what's the right phrase? I can't imagine ever writing a novel without that. I can't imagine ever, like, with a trend in mind, or like well, I got to hit these beats and I got to ramp up the scares and I got to no. It all comes from like oh my God, what if this happened? What if this happened? You know, it's like it's so exciting. You know, I'm working on one hopefully very soon about a vaudeville troupe. You know, so in like the 30s, you know, who are like traveling from town to town and they start to discover that they can what's the right phrase, they can do anything. They can levitate without an apparatus. They can juggle the features of their face. They can sneeze their nose off. They're like starting to like really like bizarre, and it's all almost like wow. But then they also start to realize that there's one entity in the audience that's been in every show of theirs, and they start to realize that they've been performing for this whatever it is, you know, and they have to keep performing for whatever it is despite scared. So imagine, you know, it's almost like you're on like a hallucinogenic, like, this is so fun, you know what? Like, wait a minute, what's going on here, you know? So yeah, so I'm not entering that thinking like, oh, vaudeville is hot right now, or entering that like, oop, I need a home invasion or family dynamics are in right now, you know? No. This is like, dude, what if a troupe suddenly could do horrifically anything on stage? You can saw each other in half for real, and then they're okay. You know, like this kind of thing. You know, that's
a lot you could do with that.
There's so much you could do with that.
Yes,
man, I know. So it's like it's pure adrenaline, like childhood excitement for that. That's what keeps bringing me back to the genre, is when I see that in like other writers and filmmakers and actors and stuff. But I will say this, despite everything I just said, there are certain writers where you can like sense that they are going for a bestseller or something, but I also respect, like, if they do it really well, I kind of respect that too. Like, I'm not like that, but I'm not over here like saying like, ew, this sellout. No, I'm like, I read a book recently, I don't have to give the name, but I was like, this person's obviously trying to write a bestseller. And then I was also like, but they're good at it.
Yep.
And that was interesting too. Like, I'm not of that ilk, I'm not of that world, but I almost see it, you know, as a songwriter, I almost see it as like someone who sets out to like write a pop song.
Yes.
Yeah. And whereas me and my band, we don't really look at things that way, you know, and we don't at all. But I still do respect like the Brill Building, where like Neil Diamond, like that whole era. And obviously the Beatles had some of that in them. They wanted to write hits.
Yep.
And so there, I do have a respect for the people who can pull that stuff off.
Have you ever been tempted to the dark sides? I say that with joviality, but the sort of more commercial side of things. Or have you, because to me, you seem someone who's very much firm in your artistic roots, but has there ever been that kind of part of you that has kind of wandered or pulled or, you know, been tempted over to something a bit more, again, for one?
Well, I had like, I don't even know what that might be for me in this, like, I don't even know exactly what that would mean. Like, and I don't mean that I don't get your question, I do, but I'm not sure. Like I had an offer, you know, someone else's like idea to write this novel, that kind of thing. Like, no. I not that I don't think that idea was good. I just that's not where I'm coming from or something. No, I would not say. Yeah, maybe like there's some times where like if things are going a little weird or whatever, you're thinking like, man, if I just wrote this kind of book, maybe it would be like everything would be better, you know. But no way, I can't imagine sitting down to actually do something to like, you know, ask someone for a list of trends or to find out what other people are doing. I guess I simply cannot imagine that. Or even what's the right phrase? Like, you know, if people are like werewolves are in, then be like, okay, then I'm writing a werewolf novel. Like, no, I can't.
Yeah,
I can't do that. If I was already like, if tomorrow somebody said vaudeville is in, well, I'm already there. So
yeah,
I've come to it from a real place or something, or a pure place. Doesn't sound like that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. There's
I can't imagine approaching things from that other angle.
Yeah. Are you familiar with it's a British folk singer, Frank Turner?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember which song it is. One of his songs, the lyrics, somebody told me that music with guitars was going out of fashion, so I had to laugh. This shit wasn't fashionable when I fell in love. If the hipsters move on, why should I give a fuck? And every time I listen to that, I'm like, oh, that's so just beautiful.
Dude, I have the book right here. There's a group of us authors that each
yes
wrote a story. I'm in that book.
Oh yeah, I went to Chilicon last year and met Mr. Tim Leben,
Yeah.
and got him
Yep.
to sign it for me because we had a right riff off
Yep.
about
It was
Frank
with
Turner.
Tim. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I saw Frank earlier. This not relevant to the podcast, but I saw Frank a few weeks ago at one of his gigs, and sensational as always.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
No, I was asked because I'm a songwriter, blah, blah, blah. And I can't, where's the book? It's like right here. I'm looking
Kenway
at,
Tragedies.
yeah. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's right up here somewhere. But anyway, I don't,
I'm sure I
yeah, I
have.
think it's covered by another book right now.
I think my
But
sound says. Yeah, I could geek out about Frank for forever. Um, Oh, now I've lost my absolute train of thought. There's something about so obviously, like you say, that sticking with the heart of your creativity is just who you are. And I think there is something as well to be said about the people who do just write from that place of experimentation, from just what they're feeling. I mean, I spent the last sort of 3-4 years ghostwriting as well as writing my own fiction. And in ghostwriting, it was a lot of that kind of formula. Yes.
what, tell me exactly what that means.
So,
Ghostwriting.
so I would have creatives hand me outlines for books, and then I would turn those outlines into full 80,000 word manuscripts.
Wow, you did that. Like, was that impossible? Like, or was it
No,
easy?
I
Like,
wrote quite a lot of them.
I met someone else recently who I didn't meet her recently. I love this woman. And she told me that she's in that too. And I'm like, wow, what, I have no, like, is there like crazy pressure that the person's gonna like hate it because it's not you? Like, I mean, or no,
I
you just
think
like, you go.
yeah, it depends on the process. I mean, if they're good enough at giving you the outline and having those early conversations, and they'll ask for like a sample of the first sort of 10,000 words or something, just to know that you're on the right track. That's fine. But I think you have to, as someone who's commissioning something in ghostwriting, you have to allow for some kind of elasticity between your idea and what gets delivered. But
Yeah.
broadly speaking, there was only I ended up, I think it was 27 books I did in 4 years, minimum at least. And out of those, I think there was only one really that had a problem, and that was because the outline just didn't deliver how big the manuscript should have, what they wanted the manuscript to be.
Wow, this is, man, I wish that we lived up the street from each other and we could just go to the pub and like talk about this more. I'm really interested. Like, it sounds like pressure cooked to me, which you're saying it's not. But also, why do you think you're able to do that many books in 4 years or whatever? Like, why wouldn't you be able to do that many just of your own ideas in the same time?
So this is, I think, kind of where my point was circling around to. So I've recently finished a novella, which is probably the book that I'm most proudest of, because it was one in which I let all expectation go. I think when you surround yourself in an environment in which you've got ghostwriters who are obviously they're putting out lots of books because it is the commercial game, they are formulaic, that kind of things. When you're embedded in that system, it does skew how you look at the creative versus business side of things, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Because it is, I mean, it's the whole, you are the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And when I'm surrounded by lots of people that are just pummeling out these books, you kind of just get lost in that slipstream. And I think there's a lot of like things in the background that I'm happy to talk to you about, sort of like maybe off air, that have contributed to being slower with my own work. But it's definitely something I'm kind of slipping back into. But yeah, I think keeping the truth, the creativity, that experimentation at the heart of what you're writing is fundamental to, especially writing books that people enjoy and ones that are remembered.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think also, I mean, I felt no different entering Bird Box, entering Daphne, and that sounded wrong. Wow.
That's in the highlight reel.
Especially because Daphne is like a 7-foot demon monster. Like,
oh no. Oh,
wow.
only the author can know them that intimately.
We're gonna have to, yeah, no, that's gonna make a hell of a little soundbite. But I felt no different, writing Daphne and writing Bird Box then I'm approaching this vaudeville idea. Like,
yeah.
Like, so keep that in mind too, is that it's not like you never know what's gonna hit. Not quite that, but because I love them all, but it's not like I had any sense that Bird Box was gonna connect in some way. It was like, let's write. And so that to me is probably sort of the biggest underlying factor of like, just do it. You just, I'm a believer of, and I'm sure I said this to you before, that if you stay in motion, you may not end up where you saw yourself going, but you will end up somewhere because you're in motion. And I feel the same way about the books. Like, if you're sitting down to write a book, something will become of this book because it's emotion, because it's happening, something will happen with this. So recently I was approached by a comic writer. And he was like, hey, so I hear you have all these unpublished novels that you know, whatever, that you want to seek it out in some way. What about me doing a graphic novel of one of them? And I was like, wow, okay. So I talked to Ryan, my manager, and we both agreed that this specific one seemed totally right. This unpublished one seems so right for a graphic novel. Sent it to the guy, and now we're already like 10 pages into the art and writing and
Amazing.
whatever.
Yeah.
So the point is, like, you know, someone can sit down and be like, oh, what's this book? Where's this going? Well, don't worry about that right now. There's a momentum in doing it at all, and there's a momentum in finishing it for sure. And who knows? That book was written in probably 6 years ago. And it's sort of just in the flow of everything, you know, like that book was written. It wasn't, you know, you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, and now to have a graphic novel of that being made, oh my God.
That's a beaut.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I will say an unearthly thank you to Josh for joining me on the podcast today. A hellish thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. And if you're looking for a community of fellow horror creatives where you can elevate your writing, claw your way over to writersofhorror.org. We would love to have you in our devilish clan. Josh, one more time, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you. And thanks everyone for listening. That was really fun.